Okay, so this feels weird for me. I used to do a lot of this, kind of dead to camera, teaching, talking, back in the day when I used to do social media in kind of a big way, which I don't do anymore and haven't done for many years. And so although I spend quite a lot of time in front of the camera or being filmed for training purposes and whatnot, there's always people there these days. I'm not, the camera's just there in the background. And so this definitely feels a bit peculiar for me to be doing one of these videos, but I felt inspired to, for a number of reasons. And I'd like to talk a little bit about retreat, the value and purpose of retreats, the magic of retreat, the alchemical container that is retreat, and why we might consider investing so much of our time and our money in doing such a thing, in stepping away from our lives, really, the day-to-day demands of our lives. And I appreciate how difficult it can be and how difficult it can feel to do that when we have jobs and children, or financial resources are limited or feel limited. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, because I have a retreat that I'm going to be, I didn't think I would be teaching any retreat this year. I am teaching retreats, but they're closed. I didn't think I would be doing any kind of open to the public retreats. And I am. I now am, on the back of a dream and a wave of inspiration. The universe conspired to make one happen, and some dates at a truly magical and spectacular venue that were previously booked right over summer solstice, an incredibly auspicious time to come together and do this kind of work, became available to me at the last minute. And so we shall be retreating. And this retreat is, you know what, it's been many, many years, I think like 8 years in the making. I first almost taught it 8 years ago. And it wasn't meant at the time. And I've almost nearly taught it, nearly booked it back in a number of other times over the years. And suddenly, somehow, it's just the moment. So I'll talk more about that momentarily, but I guess part of the reason that I'm also here, as much as I don't necessarily love this mode of capturing things these days, I teach and work very quietly these days, just with those that I work with one-to-one and the groups that I train. And we capture a lot of that content, one, because a lot of the training and what I offer is now offered in an online capacity, but also because it just feels so much more natural and spontaneous. You know, it's much more dynamic when you're actually sitting with a group of people. It feels more fluid. But I'm really conscious that since I birthed the school, and there was a bit of press and media attention and things over the last years, and that there's a lot of you out there that have connected energetically have reached to make a connection with me and my work and with the school, who I don't know. Like, I don't know you all yet. And because I don't do social media, and up until just now, right at this very moment, I've even, that hasn't just been a kind of Facebook, Instagram thing. I also collapsed my YouTube channel years ago. I died a death, and I let everything that I had produced until that point die with me, about 5 years ago now. And yeah, my return has been quiet and remains quiet. And I have actually, the school has just launched a new YouTube channel, which feels like a big step back out, so to speak. And I generally won't be doing videos like this for the channel. The channel will just have, I say just, you know, I hope it's, I really hope it's a useful resource for people. That's the intent. That's the design, is that some of the content that we're able to share, excerpts from the training, practices, teaching videos, both from me and also when we're able to from some of our esteemed guest teachers and faculty at the school. I hope that what we can offer there will be a resource. But my point is that I realize that you guys are out there. And because I haven't had any of these platforms that we're so used to people having, up until now, there hasn't really been any chance to connect with one another. And I guess I just wanted to like say thank you and hello. Like, thank you for reaching out to make that energetic connection, you know, either via contacting us, making inquiries, signing up to the newsletters. I don't even do things like newsletters very often. I used to write kind of articles, blogs, newsletters quite prolifically, and I don't do that anymore either. So I just wanted to say hi and say hello. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your interest. And I hope that at some future moment, maybe this June over summer solstice, maybe online, I do occasionally offer or sort of co-host with guest teachers that we have come in, events online, maybe on the trainings. There'll be more than one, probably from the end of next year. Anyway, now I'm just waffling, but my point is that I hope that at a future moment we actually get to meet. Because for me this journey is all about our capacity to get human and really sit together, human to human, heart to heart, and share the path. And that was the whole kind of prayer really and design for the school, is that we would be able to offer something of substance, something of substance that wasn't overly fluffy, but at the same time something that was deeply human, something that invites a shift in the paradigm. So both invites and meets the shift in paradigm that is already occurring. So here I am, just saying hi. And for those that are curious, whether or not you have any interest or ability to come on retreat with me this summer, for any of you that are interested in the principle of journey, a spiritual path that is rich, textured, and authentic, and rewarding. And for any of you that are interested in potentially, whether with me or with any other teacher, at a future moment embarking upon something like retreat or pilgrimage, or you're going on any kind of intentional adventure, maybe the few words that I have to offer here might be useful to you. So retreat this summer, I'm not going to speak much on the theme. For those that are interested, you can read more in the brochure, the retreat brochure that is on the website. The theme is, but the themes are always loose because the way that I teach is very responsive. It's very feminine. It's my only real desire is to meet you, is to meet you there, is to meet you where you are. Because my experience is that is the only place where the magic happens, where I can, yes, show up and yes, fulfill my professional and not just professional, but human responsibility to offer you the experience that I have, for want of a better word, kind of marketed, put out there, invited you into. It's also very important that these experiences do not become dominated by my view, my vision, or my agenda. They are yours. I'm holding them for you. And although the healing is always mutual, and of course, my hope is to be able to offer experience and teachings that will be valuable to you. At the same time, it's not really possible for me to know what you need. And so this is central to some extent, always to the way that I teach, but particularly with retreat. Yes, we have a theme, and this year, this summer, we are going very tantric in the true and authentic spirit of that word, not in the neo-tantric sense that we will be oriented towards sex, sacred sexuality, and all this. So this has a part in traditional tantra, but what we've done with tantra in the West is a little bit like in the same way that the pharmaceutical industry will take the natural medicine that exists within a plant and extract an aspect of that plant and then reconstitute it chemically, synthesize it. That medicine that is extracted and then synthesized, it may actually well work. And this isn't a completely fair example, because I just want to be clear that Neo-Tantra and the practice of sacred sexuality, of course, within our cultures, is very important. There are many teachers doing incredibly beautiful and important work in that way and within that arena. We're very, very split from our sexuality in the West. And Tantra absolutely is a vehicle to reconnect us with that. And Tantra in its pure form in many ways does have a lot to do with sexuality, but not in the way that Neo-Tantra has extracted it. So I just want to say that I'm not, my intention is not to degrade Neo-Tantra. I think that it has a very important role actually within the cultural shifts that we're making. Everything for a reason, right? It's the formation of Neo-Tantra. I think maybe at a past moment I would have criticized it, but the further along I go, the harder it is to place judgment on things, because everything we judge we later experience, and our perspective shifts constantly. We can always see things and experience things from new angles, and so it becomes harder to place a finite judgment on something, because the way that we see it is only ever an expression of the way that we see it in that moment at that time. It's a reflection only and exclusively of our inner condition. And so years ago, I probably would have, I've been interested in Neo-Tantra, I've critiqued Neo-Tantra, And at this point, I would say that it has a very, very valuable place, but it's important not to be confused with classical Tantra. Sex and Tantra are intimately interwoven with one another. One, because Tantra does not exclude sexuality. Tantra excludes nothing in the way that most, not all, but most religious and spiritual traditions do. Right? Tantra excludes nothing and embraces everything. And that's why it's often so marked that Tantra includes sexuality, because it's unusual in its radical embrace. Sex also has a lot to do with Tantra simply because sexuality and sexual energy is creative energy, is the force of life, and Tantra works a lot with the union of aspects of consciousness, the union of what we could call masculine and feminine, the union of awareness and ecstasy, bliss, the union of stillness and the dance of life, the ground of being. And that which plays upon that ground of being. And so energetically, sexuality can be present within the spirit of Tantra and teachings of Tantra in many different ways. But that doesn't mean that when we're practicing tantric practices, or we're practicing in tantric fashion, or we're going to do a retreat that is tantric, that what we are going to do is going to be sort of oriented toward sexuality in a literal way. Although my suspicion is that we will, I'm sure it will find its place on retreat, because which one of us doesn't have an issue with sex and our sexuality, a confused relationship to sex and sexuality? And Tantra is so many beautiful ways for us to begin to explore our relationship to this innate creative pulse within us, toward joy, toward ecstasy, toward, because these are all encompassed within sexuality, you see. We're very reductionist about sex. We don't understand sex as it really is in our culture. So anyway, this is what I do. I tend to go off on some kind of free flow of consciousness, so forgive me for that. I'm going to loop. I always manage to loop back around. So the point is that the retreat is woman and the left-handed way of liberation. And this retreat is really open to anyone interested to explore the spirituality of classical Tantra that was not exclusively, but predominantly transmitted through the yoginis, through women saint sages and enlightened practitioners, and explore the essence, the pith, the spirit of those teachings that centered around worship of the goddess, reverence for the feminine aspect of consciousness, often archetypally represented by the goddess form rather than the god. But regardless of sex or gender, this is the left-handed way, we would call it, right? The feminine way has a very different flavor and texture and approach to the more masculine way that is generally predominant within a patriarchal culture. And my experience of the left-handed way is that it can be profoundly refreshing, relieving. It brings a lot of play back into a path that can become incredibly tight and dry. A lot of people, when I work with people, what I often see, particularly maybe in the beginning, in the early path, we feel, and it's okay, it's not wrong, it may even be necessary, but in the early stages of spirituality, it's about sort of being good or getting it right. And that can be really important, but it also can become very constrictive. Or it's just messy because we don't really know what we're doing or where we're going. And there's a lot of misunderstanding of teachings and principles. And there's a huge amount of fluffy spirituality, commercial spirituality. It's very hollow in our culture. It's all about external practice and principles rather than internal undoing, revolution and evolution. It's also very void of, funnily enough, our modern spirituality is actually very void of spirit. Funnily enough, it's more like it's become more like an ethos, like usually just a new way for us to structure the ego and manage our lives. New principles for living, which is very valuable, or at least it can be. It can also be very damaging and restrictive and can become a way that actually more deeply etches the trauma or allows the trauma that drove us in the first place to just find another guise, comes in the back door. But when we've been on the path for a long time, we are dedicated, devoted practitioners of the path. Maybe we've been sort of around for years, practicing for years in varying forms, or maybe within one particular tradition or one particular style, or even if not within a tradition or a set of teachings, maybe we just have been very dedicated to a movement practice, qigong or yoga or to meditation. It can become terribly stiff. My experience is that over time, the majority of us get very, very just stiff in our spirituality. Something that's often reflected is like it's heavy, like it's serious. And of course, that can be an intensity. Like the real path is, it's gritty. It's very gritty. It can be brutal. But I think what is missed is we sort of have this. I think we're very polarized in our spirituality as Westerners, where it's either too soft, too fluffy, too commercial, too bypassy, or it becomes very dry, very intense, very shadowy. And I'm all for the shadow. You know, those that know me, it's all about being willing to get into the very basin of your being and get brave enough to roll around in the muck of your own psychic debris. But I think what is missed is that actually somewhere in the middle, you know, this can become very indulgent and consuming and also very painful. Right? And this tends to be quite fruitless over time. It's not substantial enough. But my growing suspicion is that the path with heart and the path that can become truly rewarding, revealing, and fruitful over time is of course naturally somewhere here. It's the middle way. And Tantra, when rightly understood, but easily misunderstood, but when rightly understood, particularly the left-handed way, has an extraordinary capacity to invite both the intensity like the intensity, the grit, and the play, the wilderness, the ecstasy of all life. And so it can have a very radical effect to be introduced to these more left-handed teachings of Tantra. And I think that perhaps within our patriarchally dominant culture, they are real medicine for the soul. They really are, or at least they can be for some of us. And if we feel some sort of draw, whether or not we really understand what it is that we're drawn to, it's like I don't really know anything about Tantra or what she's talking about, but there's some little internal tingle. There's a draw to this, then the chances are that we are of the ilk, we are of the disposition that these teachings may be very well suited to us, and allow us to begin to journey in a way that we haven't yet had the opportunity to. So But so I've now spent a very long time talking about the things that were not what I was going to talk about, which is, but it all interweaves, of course. So why retreat? Like, why invest our time and our money doing something like retreat? There are just 1,000 reasons, but here are a few. We live in a culture where even for the most dedicated of us, the most spiritually curious, our culture doesn't facilitate a path of death. It tends to be, even for the most sincere of us, something that we have to, the best possible, kind of fit in and squeeze in around the rabbit run, right? Like the rat race of life. And the rat race takes many forms, but it's the wheel turns fast and heavy in our modern world. And to really begin to go through deep internal psychological shift and change, to really begin to be able to have spiritual experience and deepen our practice in a way that can take root and in a way that isn't sort of fleeting. It doesn't come and go and pass us by. It actually begins to permeate the fabric of our day-to-day existence. Requires immersion into practice and the teachings. And the teachings are often something that's very neglected for us as Westerners. There's a somewhat, I think, arrogant Western view that if we just sit and meditate, all will be revealed. And to some extent, that's true. And to another extent, it really is not. Without right teaching and right view, practice alone will either leave us very stuck at some point, where the practice just becomes dead and dry. We can feel that there's no motion in it anymore. Or what happens is the practice, the ego just gets all wrapped up in and around it in a way that it can actually deepen our dilemma, not liberate us from it and from ourselves over time. And so immersion into both practice and teaching, even just for a week or so, can be absolutely life-changing. It allows us to step away just for a moment, like for a metaphorical minute, and prioritize this. And that can often leave us in a position where, when we do then step away from retreat, our practice has the potential to remain forever changed. It becomes a lot easier to remain dedicated to our practice in our day-to-day life and remain consistent in a way that we couldn't really establish before, because we've been given a taste of something and we want more. And so retreat becomes real fuel for the fire on the spiritual path and on the healing path, if we're talking more therapeutically, psychologically. When we're on retreat, we have an opportunity to also be surrounded by others who are journeying. And that is incredible medicine for the chronic emotional isolation that we live in. The wound is often related to that emotional isolation. And paradoxically, sadly, the path can often be and is often just as isolating, because there are very few people in our culture who are deeply dedicated to pursuing their own radical freedom. And so to come together and to sit together in intimacy, hearing others speak things, whether it be their pain or their revelation or their devotion or anything else, their confusion, their discontent, it's such a powerful thing. And it changes us, even when we step away from it. We remain forever changed by the way that isolation can be broken in spaces like retreat. And we learn a lot from one another. There is a quickening on retreat, because there is always a quickening when we learn in community and in this kind of intense fashion. But the stepping away from life is so vital. We got to get some space, some distance, or even with the best therapy and dedicated daily practice, there is something about being here up against your life on a daily basis that it prevents us from seeing clearly. When we step back and away, even for a short time, because I know that for some of you, especially if you have children, it's like 8 days may feel like forever. It may feel impossible. And I'll come to that in a moment. But really, it's not, right? In some ways, it's an incredible privilege. But at the other, it's a long time and it's a short time, paradoxically. But just a week or so, it's been reflected to me. Even just a few days, I think. Sometimes just a few hours. That's the point of meditation, actually. That we get some space so that perspective can be gained and clear seeing can begin to emerge, both spiritually and within a very human sense, that clear seeing can begin to emerge within the fabric of our lives. It's just impossible to navigate our lives consciously and effectively without the capacity of clear seeing, because we're just sort of tripping over ourselves and everything all of the time, and we're fumbling around at such speed that we find ourselves in a pickle a lot of the time. And so over not just 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours of practice a day, but over 8 days of being able to do this, just step back, so much can change. On a cellular level, things begin to shift and move because we're outside of our normal environment. There is a cellular shakeup, a cellular shift that allows us to begin to repattern neurally, right? It begins to re-network ourselves in the neural networks of the brain and the nervous system, in our psychological system, our mind state, our soma, the subtle body, our emotional system. So much can shift. And then that retreat becomes like a springboard, right? Back out into our lives. And this is the way that I've always taught and designed retreats. They're not meant to, I think it's as retreat should be. I think it's as retreat is intended in its original spiritual form. The way that a lot of retreats are offered these days is it's just time to sort of, I don't know, just rest and relax. And that has benefit. And I always offer plenty of that. We do need a lot of that recuperation. Our nervous systems are they're fried, right? We're fried, we're stretched, we're overstretched by life. And we need that. And I always offer that. But they're also meant to be more than just a week, sort of doing some stretching and lying around a pool. They're meant to be opportunities to make a deep pivot. They are opportunities to step in and come out changed. And of course, the extent to which that can occur very much depends on us, a willingness to be brave and open. Because of course, to come in these situations requires courage, especially if we've never been before. But I know it's so cheesy, forgive me, but what is it they say? Like, everything that we're looking for is on the other side of fear. It's like the fact that these things feel impossible, difficult, financially challenging. We don't know if we can come away from the kids. We don't know if we can afford the pounds, we're scared to come in and be among people we don't know and learn things that we're not familiar with, or go deeper, or whatever. There's 1,000 things. It's crossing the threshold of those 1,000 things that actually begins to change and heal us in ways that nothing else ever could. If we aren't crossing those imagined limitations, then what is it that we're even doing? And so when we make an investment like this, an investment in time and money. We are investing in ourselves, in our healing, in our freedom, and in our path in a way that is invaluable. It's actually an internal action. It's a deep internal psychological statement. It is an act of devotion to ourselves, to our freedom, and to the path. And when we begin to invest in ourselves and in the path, devote to our freedom and to the path in such a manner, the impact of that cannot really be underestimated. Of course, it's hard to come away from children. I know that. You know, a few years ago, I left my only 3-year-old at the time, something I never thought I would do. You know, I never believed would be possible. I am a parent, like I imagine a lot of you, who wants to raise my child in a way that offers them safety and connection. I don't want to traumatize him. And I never would have imagined that I would leave my 3-year-old on the back of a lot of other change that we had been through as a family, and go for almost 3 weeks to the other side of the world, and have really almost no contact with him for that time in pilgrimage. And it was one of the hardest, bravest, and most remarkable things that I've ever done. And it changed me. And coming away from my child allowed me to become a better mother, because I had lost myself. And even though I was giving him everything that I could, the truth is I don't think I realized how little it was that I had to offer. And I'm not saying that with any sort of, I'm not shaming or blaming myself there as a parent. I did an amazing job with those early years of mothering him, but I was also very broken. And when we're empty, you can't pour from an empty cup. I was so empty, and I needed to find myself again, and I needed to fill up. And to do that, really, what I was doing wasn't sufficient. I had to step away. I had to break away and take the deepest in breath that I had ever taken, and the deepest out breath, because there was so much that needed to be expelled, dispelled, dispersed, dissolved, so that there could be room to take that in breath and kind of go, oh, here I am. Like, here I am. And it was hard. You know, it was hard for him and it was hard for me. But the funny thing was that it actually benefited all of us as a family in a million ways that I won't get into here. But I've seen it time and again with mothers that I work with, the fear of stepping away for some days from their children, especially when they're young, the anxiety that comes up around that. But I can honestly say that I think that as parents, it might be one of the most valuable things that we can do. I say that without reserve. The things that feel the most impossible are often the things that are most invaluable. They're the things that we need the most. And when we make a decision to do that, the journey has begun already. It doesn't begin when we arrive on retreat together on 15th of June in summer. It begins the moment that you decide, or you realize, because sometimes it's a realization. Everything here says, I can't do this, I can't afford this, I can't spend that much money on myself, I can't leave my kids, I can't take another week off work, I can't, you know, the can'ts. But something inside you knows that you need to do it, that you're going to find the money, that you're going to make the time, that you're going to meet your terror, and you're going to come anyway. That's when the journey begins. Something inside you has already begun to shift, alchemize, and transform. It begins now, and it doesn't end until a long time after we've said goodbye to one another on June 22nd. It's exciting. It's terrifying, and it's exciting. And that's how life's meant to be, both, always, all at the same time. it's like when the I can't do this is replaced by the I can't not. I have to do something. I'm not okay. I'm stuck. I'm lost. I'm struggling. And we have to. We must. And that's really what the path is all about. It's about renunciation and extracting ourselves from the paradigm that is killing us quietly, and beginning to actively choose, not just in our thoughts, but in our actions, another way of living and being. That is what the spiritual path is about. But to really walk it with intentionality and in a way that bears fruit requires teaching and learning and practice and immersion and courage and all kinds of things. And the purpose of retreat is to invite us into all of those things so that real internal change can begin to occur, so that we can take a deep out breath and a very deep in breath. A lot of us have a deep spiritual yearning, and it maybe it's begun to be fully met, and coming on retreat is a way to begin to feed that. Or maybe it hasn't been met yet. We think of ourselves as being very spiritual, and there is a definite earnest curiosity there, but nothing that we've come across thus far in our commercial landscape and or within our Western paradigm has really truly been able to meet that spiritual impulse. And so retreat is about honoring that spiritual impulse, that yearning at depth. It's so much fun. Even what's sticky and tricky and painful and difficult, because it will always be all of the things. You know, awakening excludes nothing. So these spaces, when we come together on retreat, they exclude nothing. They welcome everything. And we can go to all the places that we need to. We can make friends, right, with our humanity in these spaces. And it's such a special thing. It really is. So I don't know if this has been of use to any of you. It's been a very long video, not what I expected. But the best things usually aren't what we expect, are they? So come join me. The booking, I don't know what the day is. I don't know what the date is. Booking opens to the public sometime. The booking is going to work in, it's working in 3 stages. So some placements are already pre-booked, those that I personally work with and I've known for years and train with me, they do get option to pre-book so that they can secure places before kind of first come, first serve comes into play. So that first stage of booking has already been completed. Second stage of booking is opening up to the general public, but first just to those of you that are on my newsletter. And so that will be those of you viewing this video, because initially this video is just going to be connected to a little newsletter that we're going to send out. And so over the next few weeks, there is an opportunity for you guys who have already sought to make a connection with either me or the school to make your inquiries and potentially secure a place to come and join us in June. And And then after that, it will open to the general public in a more expansive sense, in the sense that there will be public marketing and all of these things. And my trust is always that the group that is meant to come together at this specific moment in time will come together. We will find one another. And it's funny, actually, because that does make me want to finish by saying that apart from the fact that I am, some of you will know, some of you won't, my whole adult life I've lived in Spain. I moved back to the UK for a number of years, and this school is essentially UK based. The business is a UK incorporated company, limited company. But I moved back to the south coast of Spain again last year, and retreat is here in my home in Andalusia. And there are deep karmic reasons that my home is here. This is a place that I have known for many lifetimes. And something interesting has begun to become apparent to me is that even people I've known for years, sometimes not to my knowledge, not everyone, but a lot of my students and people I work with seem to have some completely independent connection to the south coast of Spain, or draw to the south coast of Spain. And I have this inkling, we find one another again. There are karmic connections interplaying all of the time, and we find one another again. And so maybe it's the retreat you're drawn to, or maybe it's something about this place, the stunning wilds of Andalusia. They have a deep connection with, I'm going to go a bit esoteric here. It's not something I always do so publicly, but I think perhaps there is more and more of a need for this kind of open talking, because it's often talked about in environments that don't necessarily offer legitimacy. And these things need to be and are being increasingly legitimized. And that's important because it invites us to begin to expand towards a much more esoteric understanding and view of who and what we are and what we're really doing here, individually and collectively. But, this area is very connected to the communities of Atlantis and other wisdom cultures, but particularly to Atlantis. And so, if that means anything to any of you. And so many of us are drawn back into these, it's not just one location, but certain territories, both here around the Med and Atlantic, and also elsewhere within the world. We are remembering, and we are finding our way back to one another. So for me, this year's retreat somehow feels like that is part of it. That is connected. My battery's going to die. It's the universe telling me that I've talked for far too long and it's time to go. So I'm going to go. But I guess there are 1,000 reasons that, like I said, that you might feel that you can't come and retreat. And there are also 1,000 different reasons that you might feel drawn to. My experience is that we can learn to trust, that we must learn to trust the body, because the soul whispers through it. And when we become brave enough to follow the whispers of the heart, which I believe is an Emmett Fox quote, really extraordinary things begin to come to pass, and life becomes imbued with the magic that has until that point perhaps been missing. So whether I get to meet you this time or not, I'm sending my love. Thank you for sitting with me for such a terribly long time. And Yeah, whether in this moment or the next, may we meet again. Take care. Much love.